Hi, welcome to another episode of GFAtv. My name is Federico Musgrove Stetson, and I'm the Director of Regional Symposia for the GFA. Last month we had our very first virtual symposium, with a technique workshop by Andrea González Caballero, a composition workshop by Ryan Ayers, and a performance by Grisha Goryachev. In today's episodes, we wanted to give you a taste of the symposium, and hopefully you can join us for the next one.
Hello, my name is Andrea González Caballero, and I'm happy to share today's video with all of you. I've been thinking of how to use the time to improve our technical issues and to develop a strategy to practice efficiently. So I've decided to create this video divided in two parts. The first one will cover examples of how to improve some technical issues and facilitate the process of learning scales or how to play a barré. And the second one will cover 4 steps to follow when you don't know where to start from while practicing. Let's start with the examples. The first example is about how to practice a scale. And I will take as example the first scale of the etude number 7 by Heitor Villalobos. So for the right hand, we have the M and I fingers alternation, and we start placing the M finger on the first string, and the scale will be rest stroke. If it's difficult to visualize the fingers without the left hand, you can write them down on the score and read it. It's much easier. And when we have to practice the left hand fingerings without the right hand, I recommend to tap on the strings so you can reproduce the note that you should be playing with both hands. Second point is coordination. It's time to combine both hands' work. If we continue with the left hand, it's very important and basic step to place first left hand fingers before plugging with the right hand. This is the first step for coordination. Especially when we have a descending scale like this one, it's important to place all the fingers that belong to the same string at the same time. For example, here, on the second string, I place both fourth and second, third string 2 and 1, if we do it so, we will be more accurate and we will create smaller movements. So I recommend you to avoid this kind of movements for the left hand. And if we go to the right hand, it's the same. The smaller the movements, the closer you are to the strings and the more accurate you can play. And another thing that is important is to imagine that the starting point and the final point of the scale are drawing a vertical line that is perpendicular to the strings, like this. Avoid this one. And the last point of the section scale is to create an exercise. We have the scale and we can create a dotted rhythm from this. Or the second option is if we do this kind of exercise, we are practicing short, accurate, and fast movements with the right hand. And the other exercise you can practice is to extend the scale. For example, we have a descending scale here. And instead of finishing here the scale, we can go backwards and do a descending and ascending scale. And then we can go one fret up and continue the same example. Don't forget to play the vertical line here with the right hand and to be accurate with the left hand, placing all the fingers possible ahead. It's time to practice scales, and I haven't mentioned this before, but it's very, very important. Every time you are beginning a new exercise, you have to take the time to analyze your hands, the movements, the fingerings, so it's much better if you start with a very slow tempo. Another important thing is to start practicing with the metronome. Take a slow tempo, put the metronome, and start practicing the scale. So the idea when practicing the scale is to start very slow and having the beat of the metronome together with each of the notes of the scale. Then we will move forward and we will put the metronome beat every 2 notes of the scale, and then we will move forward and we will put the beat of the metronome every 4 notes of the scale. If we do it so, we will learn from the beginning to be very accurate with the notes of the scale, and we will have a very balanced scale. Let's practice the exercise of the longer scale, this one that is descending and ascending with the metronome. Then we can put the beat of the metronome every 2 notes. And an extra thing I want to mention is where to place the thumb of the right hand. It's very important to analyze it and see what's more comfortable for you. You can place it on the 5th string or the 6th string, or even if it's very complicated for you, you can put it on the 4th string and then move it while you play the scale. And also when we are ascending, look where you want to place the thumb again on the strings. For example, if I'm on the 6th string and I arrive to the 3rd string, I already want to put some support for my hand, and I will put the thumb on the 6th string again. Example number 2 is a passage from the Concierto de Aranjuez by Rodrigo. And this is an example of how to simplify a passage when we have both hands very active and both of them are doing hard work. So the solution is to simplify one of those hands. In this case, we will keep the fingerings for the right hand and we will play the arpeggio that is written, and then we will find another position for the left hand. I will play the original passage. So in this case, I will keep the right hand fingerings and I will play the arpeggio, and then I will translate all these positions that are quite difficult to coordinate with the right hand, and I will replace them just for one chord. How to find the correct chord or the position? Write down the right hand fingerings and look which strings you are playing. For example, in this case, I have the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, and the 1st. So I've decided to choose the D major chord. And based on this position, I can keep the right hand arpeggio and practice on a D major chord. Point number 3 is barré. One of the most useful techniques we have, but also one of the trickiest and more difficult ones. So I will show you some points to follow to improve your abilities with the barrés, and also examples of different barrés you can find. I will start the example on the 5th fret because I think it's a good place to start with. If you start on the 1st or 2nd fret, the distance is wider and it will be much difficult. But also if you start here, the fingers don't have so much space. So I recommend you to start practicing barrés maybe on the 5th fret. There are different barrés. You can find a half barré without extra fingers, so just 4 notes, for example. We can find half barré with extra fingers. So in this case, you have to distribute the energy of the hand, not just by pressing the first finger, but also adjusting all the fingers to the position. We have a whole barré, or also a whole barré with extra fingers. First point is to press with this part of the finger, with the left side of the finger, instead of with the center, with this flat part of the finger. It will be much easier to get a good sound with the barré. And together with this point goes the second point, and for me it's one of the most important things to pay attention to, and it's the thumb. Sometimes we forget about this finger because we don't see it or because we don't need to put fingerings for it, but it's one of the most important fingers of the left hand, and especially when we are playing the barrés. The important thing is to place it a little bit more to the right comparing to where the first finger is located. Because then we will have this position that will give us more strength on the first finger. And then another important thing is don't place the barré press a lot and then try to add the other fingers that are going in the opposite direction, because if we press to the left with the first finger and to the right with the other fingers, we are creating a conflict in our left hand. So I recommend you to draw the position in the air. For example, if we have to play with the fourth, second, and third finger and the barré, imagine how it should be and then press with all the fingers together. Don't start with the barré and then adding the other fingers. It's better to have the idea of the whole position from the beginning. It's time to practice the barré. And I want to share with you an exercise that it can be adaptable, it can be longer or shorter depending on how much time you want to spend on this exercise. The first option is to start with a half barré and prepare an arpeggio with the thumb, the I finger on the third string, the M finger on the second, and the A finger on the first string. And the exercise will consist on playing the barré. The second time we do the arpeggio, we will add the second finger, then the third finger, and then the fourth, and backwards. If you see, I'm not starting to play the exercise just focusing on the first finger, but I have in my mind how it will look if I have to play also with the second, third, and fourth finger later. So I am adapting my hand to the final position from the beginning. Maybe you can put the final position first and then take all the fingers and then just keep the barré. Then we can move to the second string, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, that it will be a little bit more difficult. And if you want to continue, you can move the barré to the fourth fret and do the same exercise. So the first fret will be the most difficult one, so if you want, you can just play on the first three strings. It's very important, if it's the first time you are doing an exercise with the barré, to take a rest and don't force the hand. And now I want to show you a couple of examples of passages that have barrés. The first one, you can find it on the piece composed by Francisco Tárrega called Capricho Árabe. If you remember, the second part of the piece begins with a barré on the third fret. And then we have also the position that we have to add the second, third, and fourth finger. So how to practice these kind of passages? First, visualize the whole position. Don't focus everything on the barré. Don't press too much to the left side, because remember that we need also a strength to press with the other fingers. Try to balance the hand, finding the best position for your thumb. In my case, I put the thumb between the barré and the second finger, and not too high, because then the fingers will be too short, or too low, because this is not very balanced for the hand. So find a middle position and put the thumb in a comfortable way for you. And then we start playing, and you will see that we will have to adapt the first position to the final one. And you will think that this one is even harder than the previous one, and it's true because our left hand has to open more. So we have a wider position for the left hand here. So what to do in this case if you think that the forefinger will never get to play the correct position? And it's because we need an extra help. We need the help from our elbow. I haven't mentioned this before, I think, but it's very, very important to use our elbow to adapt the left hand as well. So I started with my elbow here, and then I had to move my elbow a little bit closer to my body because it helps me with the forefinger as well. What I recommend you to avoid is to try to move the shoulders or your body to the guitar. This doesn't help. Try to move a little bit the elbow to your body, and you will see that it will be much easier to get to these positions. And you can find the second example on a piece composed by Francisco Tárrega as well, and that you might know, and it's called Lágrima. This passage has something special, and it's that we have to jump from here, from this position, to a position that has a barré. In this case, it's a half barré, so maybe it's not so hard to play comparing to the previous one, but it's difficult because we have to get to this position. I have mentioned that it's important to draw the final position if we have a barré and extra fingers. But if we have to jump from one position that has a common finger, if you look at here, move the forefinger and look how the first finger is ready to play, and also the third finger. Don't think that you don't have time to get to this position, because it's not true. If you practice it very slow, you will see that you have time in this process to move the hand and draw the barré before playing it. And next, what to do when we arrive here and we have to change from a barré that is on the 9th fret to one that is on the 7th fret. So it's super important to relax the left hand and move it and press again. Don't try to bring the energy you are putting on the first finger to the 7th fret, and if we continue to have barrés, to the 5th and so on, because you will be tired and maybe the barré will not sound as well as it could be. So this has been the section of the examples, and now we go to the section number 2 of the video. This consists on 4 steps that you can follow if you think that you are a little bit lost or you don't know where to start from when you are practicing and you think that you are not improving as fast as you want. This is what I do if I want to improve fast and use my time efficiently. First thing is stop playing and start thinking. Sometimes we are focused on repeating a passage and it's not convenient because we are repeating most of the times without knowing which one is our goal or what are the things that we want to change. Second one, find the difficult passage and name the problem. It can be, for example, a difficult arpeggio, or it can be a difficult barré, or it can be coordination problem, but find the problem and name it. The third step is, after you know where is the problem, find the solution. If you have a barré and it's creating a problem, maybe you should change the elbow, or maybe you should change the thumb position, or maybe you should press a little bit more with the first finger. And the fourth step is to start practicing it. So every time you repeat the passage, it's because you know where is the problem, you know the solution, or at least one solution that you want to try, and then you have the materials to practice the passage. I hope all this information can help you. Keep practicing and enjoy playing the guitar.
Hello. My name is Ryan Ayers, and I am thrilled to be a part of the 2021 GFA Symposium. So writing music can be quite the tricky thing. In my early days, it felt a little bit easier. I wasn't that good at playing guitar, so I wrote what sounded cool to me and what my limited skills on the instrument could handle. Then I started studying guitar, and somehow the more I learned about music and the better I got at playing guitar, the actual writing and composition side became much, much harder. I started to concern myself with the idea that I needed to sound smart in my music. And so I went down that path for a little bit, armed with my music theory, some complicated rhythms, and the 20th century idea that great music should be challenging and deep. And guess what? The music I attempted to write was terrible. It was clunky, pompous, zero fun to work on, and I really didn't like playing it, and I especially did not like hearing it. Luckily, I had a teacher who, while fighting his way through one of my smart monstrosities, remarked that he didn't hear any of me in the piece, that my voice seemed to be missing from my own music. And that really stuck with me, and I realized I needed to start trusting my ear, start trusting what I thought sounded good, or cool, or interesting, and let that be my only guide when I was writing music, to start composing in my voice. So I came up with a way to compose that is always checking in with my ear, my voice, and giving it material to ask the simple question, does this sound good to me? We want to make sure that we have a way to capture our good ideas and be able to draw on them later on as we start to compose. We sort of create a well of ideas. Early on in my writing, I had a rule that if I remembered an idea the next day, then it was a good and worthy idea. And if I forgot it, well, it wasn't that good and didn't deserve to be in a composition. What a terrible rule. When you come across an idea that you like, something that sounds cool to you, record it, video it, document it, and/or write it out. Always, every time. I've even interrupted lessons when I happened to play something new that sounded good. I apologized to the student, pulled out my phone, got the idea down, and then flipped back into teacher mode once I knew it was safely on my phone. So start to create a well of these ideas. My phone is filled with videos and voice memos of these sketches, noodlins, fiddlins, and cool ideas. So when I'm in the mood to write, I can sit down, sift through the well, and see if I'm ready to help a piece grow out of one of these ideas. So create that well. F9 tuning. So there are 3 ways I tend to generate ideas for compositions, and this is sort of my pre-composition phase, and these are the ideas that end up going into that well. And it's practicing other people's music, setting up constraints or restrictions, and then my favorite, unfocused noodling. Practicing other people's music is super helpful to the composition process. It pulls you into another's world of musical structure and how they play guitar. Maybe introducing you to a new rhythmic idea, or chord voicing, or shapes that you've never put into your hands before, maybe even a new tuning. and they break you out of your own habits, your ruts, known moves, and your conventions. So you can use these ideas as a jumping off point for your own writing, or wait for the happy accidents that come from stepping into this other world. So one day I was practicing Andrew York's Yamor. Great piece, totally love it. And it's in the tuning of D-A-D, F-sharp, B-D, which was new for me, and so it was a little awkward and fresh and exciting. Well, playing the opening section, I made a mistake. I confused the order of the chords, which flustered me, so then I played a wrong rhythm. And, well, in other words, it was just a complete and total failure of playing the piece. But what I did play, and here's the happy accident time, sounded really cool to my ear. Nothing like Yamor, but really cool to my ear. So I recreated it, tweaked it a little bit, added onto it, and lo and behold, I had an opening to my brand new piece. So I recorded it into my voice memos under Yamor tuning number 1. And soon, over that month, my phone filled up with Yamor tuning section 2, section 3, section 4, etc. And as I worked through it, writing more and more sections, I kept coming back to that well until I managed to stitch together all of the sections, and an entire 7-minute and 30-second song was born, and eventually renamed from Yamor tuning to Lanterns. All from playing someone else's piece. Poorly. So thanks, Andy, and thanks, Yamor. Setting up constraints or restrictions is a highly structured way of generating musical ideas. Find a box that you're interested in exploring. The box is going to be a technique, a rhythm, a limitation of strings or notes, or maybe a right-hand pattern. You explore that box, the dimension-shaped parameters of it, and then try and fill it up with ideas that fit inside, and then you can use those ideas to build a piece. My piece Folds started off as an exercise in constraint. Its box was a simple PIMA block chord, staccato pulse. I had capo 4, and I wanted to see how long could I make that sound interesting. Could I turn that into a piece? So what did I have at my disposal? First, I had accents. So I thought about a pulsing piece that I've heard before. I thought of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and decided to give a little nod to the great man. Later on in the piece, I'm still doing some more accents. And then move into my next idea for the box, dynamics. Switching registers, moving from 6th string to 1st string, taking the same notes, I also realized would get me some extra spaces. So if I take my first idea, that's sort of the call, and the response, I put those same notes, open, 2nd, 3rd fret, on the 1st string, open, 2nd, 3rd. Didn't like doing the exact same rhythm, did not sound good to my ear, but if I made it a little bit more of a flourish, well, that sounded cool. I also took a look at kind of my hand position and noticed that my early chords were narrow voicings. fingers kind of in the same frets around the same area. And so when I was making another section, I knew that I wanted it to sound wider. And so I figured if I made my hand look wider, I could do that. And instead of just being on the bottom 4 strings with my fingers, and then actually looked at my hand and physically made it wider and ended up coming up with this section. And one of the final pieces that I put into the box was expanding and contracting the rhythms. So literally taking these ideas that I was starting to form and think about and just extending them. So the first time we hear an idea is normal. The second time we hear it, I'm just going to extend that out further. Just a little bit further. And it keeps growing and growing and growing till later on the final statement of it in the piece ends up being almost comically long. It's like a little musical wink that I put to the audience of like, hey, we're having a little bit of fun here with this piece folds. Eventually, I did find a section that I felt I could break the rules and lift the constraints a little bit. And I played a strummed chord to change the texture, and then I was going to return to the pulse. Well, happy accident time. Turns out when you strum a 5-string chord and return to your 4-finger staccato pattern, well, that leaves one of the strings ringing right in the middle of your chord. Let's definitely put more of that into the piece. So I ended up coming up with this section. So constraints and restrictions, they're just a marvelous springboard for your composing. This is my favorite unstructured way to come up with musical ideas. It's where I try to divide my attention between my guitar and something else that I have a mild interest in. Maybe a TV show, sports, a podcast, or even just putting the strap on my guitar and walking around my apartment, trying not to bump into things. The goal is to divide up your attention to free up the guitar side of your brain, not worry about technique or the notes or the chords, but rather just to play as free and as open as possible. And then, when something interesting happens, your focus snaps back to the guitar and you give it the attention it deserves to see if it's worth exploring further. My sketchwell is filled with recordings that have TV sounds pretty prominently in the background.
Now, I'm going to send you money. It's just that the guy controls my money. We're in a really weird place right now. Okay? And he's out there right now in the car. And he thinks I'm in here killing you. I'm not calling an audible right now. I'm just letting you know, when we get out there, he might seem a little confused. And you might
All right, now we are really getting into it. When I'm ready to compose a piece, I like to work in what I call the 3x3 generalities. These help me move forward through the writing process without getting into specific music theory. They are more general and simple ideas about music, the shape, duration, and direction of the notes, and less about the specific notes themselves. And I really try to follow my ear and keep my questions simple to aid me in this process. Questions like, do I like this? Do I want to move higher in pitch? Do I want to move lower in pitch? Do I want to make this part busier? Do I want to make it more spacey and more sparse? So, Tier 1, idea, riff, mood. These are all the bits and bobs that you've been collecting in your well of sketches. Tier number 2 asks a question of that idea, riff, or mood. Do we want to build on it? Do we want to contrast it and play something different? Or do we want to transition through it? Tier number 3 gets a little more specific musically. If we have two voices, a low and a high, do we want to move in parallel fashion, moving in the same direction? Both voices move up. In opposing, one moves up, one moves down. Or in oblique motion, one voice moves and the other one stays exactly the same. Let's go into a little more detail and see how I used the 3x3s to compose my piece, Island Moonshine. This was the new idea, riff, mood that magically came to me while I was teaching a student how to play, of all things, a Fergie song. I don't know why, but it did. So now I had a starting place for composing. I went to my well and pulled up the recording, and it was time to put my ear to work with some simple questions. So I move into the next 3x3 and ask myself, do I want to build, contrast, or transition? So that first section actually looped pretty effortlessly. In fact, I found myself that first night just playing it around and around and around. So I didn't feel like I wanted to build it out any further. Plus, it also felt like we're ready to move. So I didn't need a transition. I'm ready to just jump to the next section. So we're going to try and contrast it. So what would be a good contrast to what I just played? Well, I can move things higher. I can let the bass note ring instead of play the steady rhythm. And I can get a little bit busier, flashier. So I look for my next bass note. I was struck with the thought that, what was cool about that original idea? It was the hammer-on pull-off move. So I wonder if I can use that as a through line into this next section to kind of lead me through. So I've got my bass line, my bass note that I'm going to hold out, and now I just start looking for hammer-ons. And that's where my ear kind of perked up and went, yes, that, but I want up, up, up. So again, not thinking specifically notes, just thinking in general direction. So I know that I want to go up further. So I do a hammer-on third string, and look at that, my third finger is hovering over second string. So what happens if I do a hammer-on second? And now 4 fingers hovering over here. Let's try it right there. Ooh, not a good note. Ooh. That's a nice note. All right. So now we have a new idea. Awesome. We're right back to Tier 1. And so we get to look at this new idea and ask the Tier 2 question. Do we want to build, contrast, or transition out of this? Well, we just got here, so we don't want to transition. And it's a cool idea, so I'm not ready to contrast it yet. So we're going to build on this idea. So I start searching around for the next bass note. Ooh, I like this one right here. And now we move into Tier 3, and to give us some ideas of what we can do with this. So my bass note moved upwards. It got higher. So Tier 3 has us look at, do we want to move in parallel motion, opposing, or oblique motion? So parallel motion means that if my bass note went up, then my high notes are going to move up. So let's just see if I can get lucky and do the exact same thing I did before, just with higher notes. Oh, sometimes it's super easy to figure out that your ear does not like a sound. Parallel motion, not going to work for us. Let's try oblique. So oblique means we're going to leave those top flourishes exactly where they are, just change the bass note. Bass note change. Better sound than parallel, but I'm not excited by it. The ear's not going like, yes, that's it. That's what it should sound like. So now let's try opposing motion. So our bass note moved up, so our flourish moving down. So now instead of hammer-ons, which are an upward motion, maybe we're going to do some pull-offs. Well, isn't that just lovely? We are 2 steps into our new section. We've got 2 great ideas. Let's keep going. So we need to find our next bass note. And again, that's a nice lower bass note. We came from here, we climbed up, and now we're stepping down. So my bass note moved down, so my flourishes are going to move up. I do some poking around and settle on. And so now I've done 1, 2, 3 cool things into this section. I do have this idea in music that tends to move in like 4s or 8s and those nice even numbers. And so I go, well, I want to start making my way back. So again, I'm back to tier 2, build, contrast, transition. I'm ready to transition, which means I want to make my way back towards my original chords. So I can see that physically on the guitar. So I'm going to start moving in parallel. I'm going to move down with both voices. And now I'm ready to repeat the section. And with a simple transition right there, just 2 chimes, it sends me right back up to the top. So that's how I write with the 3x3 generalities. Well, that's it. It really has been great to share some of my journey in composing with all of you. Thanks so much for watching and for being a part of the 2021 GFA Virtual Symposium. Good luck with your compositions, and I hope to hear some of them soon. Feel free to get in touch online to share what you're working on or ask me any questions. Cheers.